Welcome everyone to today's podcast. My name is Paul. I'm very pleased to have been joined by Rob.
Hiya guys, how you doing?
Welcome back, family. Please feel free to check out the other broadcasts on the channel. We've got just over 30 on there. We've got one on each of the steps, 2 on step 1 and 2 on step 2. There are 3 on sponsorship. What is it? Am I ready to become a sponsor? And how do I sponsor? We've got 1 on an entire psychic change, 1 on the spiritual malady, another one on the ABCs of addiction and recovery. We've got about 8 personal stories. And very recently, a friend of mine with over 4 decades of continuous sobriety very kindly came on the channel and recorded a message about the origins and establishment and history of Cocaine Anonymous in the week of its 39th year. Since its beginning in 1982 in the west coast of America. So please check that out. That's Jennifer R., the history of CA and its growth. So please feel free, as always, to reach out in the chat below the videos. Please feel free to ask any questions or to add anything, you'd like to add to what is shared today. And please reach out. So without further ado, today we've got a great topic called Keep Your Foot on the Gas. So it's about consistency and the forming of healthy habits in recovery, the literature, the meetings, working with others, step work, spiritual principles, spiritual literature, all that good stuff. So that's the theme of today's podcast. And as always, I'm really happy to hand the floor over to Rob.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hi everybody. I'm Rob. I'm a recovered cocaine addict, and one of my favorite little sayings about keeping your foot on the gas. I firmly believe, in my experience, if you keep your foot on the gas and you keep that momentum going in the program, even after you finish your 12 steps, that's getting to the sort of next stage of continual sobriety and clean time. And for me, it was a reasonably easy transition because I had a routine in addiction. I had a routine that I would wake up and need cocaine. So instead of doing that daily routine of getting the money, getting the drug, getting the money, getting the drug, and continuously during the day, I've swapped it for, prayer, meditation, calling others, reaching out, doing my work with my sponsees, book work and step work. And, that is what continually, it keeps my moral compass facing north, heading in the right direction, a sense of direction to go in, and it keeps me fit and well. It's basically the thing that just gives me that continuous sobriety. I've just turned 9 months last weekend. Still only a baby, by far. I'm still learning every day. As I go through the book again, every single time with a new sponsee, I'm learning something new, and it opens my eyes to a little bit more in the program and the book. It's I think relapses and things like that happen because you start to rest on your laurels. You start to sit back and think, oh, I've got this. I've done 9 months. I've got this. I know that I've got lots and lots of relapses left in me, but I don't have another recovery. So it's essential that I keep myself clean and sober, every single day. And, I ask for that in my prayer in the morning. And I thank God for, in my prayer in the evening for another day clean and sober. And as long as I follow those, those guides, of what you're supposed to do every day, and I don't drop anything out, I'm absolutely fine. It's sort of like I don't know, like a virtual barrier, spiritual barrier, that stops me from having that stinking thinking. I don't know what you think, Paul, if you've got the same sort of experience in that.
Absolutely. I think a daily program of action gives us like an insurance policy. Well, it's ultimately a relationship with God, isn't it? And I think the bigger picture, Rob, is that connection with God gives us grace, if you like, or strength or wisdom to pursue what's right. And I think wisdom and what we hear in the rooms, right? Most of what I share is regurgitated, what I've heard shared over the years in the rooms. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just new to me or new to you, and I think for me, listening in recovery meetings to the 12-step message of hope, faith and courage, and trying to listen with the heart instead of the critical mind, and to accept people's experience and how they cross that bridge to normal living, and then incorporate a daily program of action from day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, that keeps them free of obsessive thinking, that keeps them free of the lower power, the bedevilments, the devil, the yang, the darkness, and keeping a pure heart. I think for me, Rob, that's the essence of recovery. Don't get into evil surmisings, evil thoughts, fury, resentment, wrath. Just keep it simple, go on quietly, and develop a way of living through prayer, through faith, through working with others, through taking phone calls, through being responsible, and ultimately being honourable with ourselves. Because, the acceptance levels we had to stay in active addiction were pretty stark. You know what I mean? The consequences, it's like, oh, wow, I've lost that job. Doesn't matter. Just get some more gear. The missus has left. So I've got the gear organised. It'll be all right. Oh, my mind's going now. Just be all right. It's all right. I've got some more gear coming in an hour. Oh, well, I'll be all right. I've run out of money again. Oh, I'm running out of electric. We had great tenacity. We had great courage, right? We had great commitment to drugs, right? If I can use half of that in recovery, and I'm not always sure I do, to be candid, but if I can, Rob, then chances are I'll have a long and healthy sobriety.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it depends on your perspective. I mean, personally, I believe that grace and wisdom and mercy enable us to do the next right thing. And, Rob, the reality is some moments it's simply move a muscle, change a thought. It's that simple sometimes. I had an addict, and as you know, Rob, like yourself, I'm working with folks, and sometimes really desperate individuals that are in a bad way, that have to stay clean. I have to stay clean or will die. And helping them to have acceptance around the solution of recovery in these rooms and in these steps, and ultimately in God's power, in unseen power and grace. It can be quite a journey, turning a whole life around, or being a tiny part of seeing a whole life turned around from living out of a spoon 6 or 7 times a day and having to do all kinds of stuff to living to use, using to live, ways and means to get more. Seeing them turn from that to a life of faith and trust, personal faith and trust, and staying connected and working with others. And, it does happen, but not easily. That there has to be a lot of cleaning house, right? A lot of acknowledgement of resentments, the change from resentment to acceptance. There has to be a complete change. And I often liken it, Rob, to these giant £300 million cruise ships that come into harbour. Sometimes takes them a couple of hours to even pull up alongside the dock because they move that slowly. All right, really slowly, And I think seeing lives turned around completely from decades of drug abuse, and I've seen it. In fact, I've seen it time and time again. It does happen. But I've also seen people that have killed themselves or withered. I've actually seen people in hospital beds, Rob. I've sat with people in rooms that, sometimes just get a month or two clean and then they go back out and die. It's the reality of working with others. But on the topic of consistency, I think, we become in the practice of doing the next right thing. And I think, that having things in place on a daily basis. And I think that's the essence of working with others, commonly called sponsorship. Not my favourite term, I have to say, but we know what we mean. Working with others and trying to help blokes get through this process is that you're committed. When I agree to take a bloke on, I'm committed to dozens of hours of intensive step work, right? And having them appointments in place on a daily basis, as well as service commitments and good self-care. Well, that is a life worth living. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think I'm on my fifth victim now. My hostages, as I call them. I'm 5 sponsees in. I've had some that have got it very quickly and some that it's been a real battle, and it's you live that journey with them, and to see somebody come out of the other side of addiction, get this program and sort of wake up and smell the coffee, it is beautiful. It is something that definitely 100% keeps me clean. That thought that, in a few weeks' time, they're going to be just about sort of getting that, message and you're far enough through the book that they should be having, sort of spiritual experiences. And, it's a real pleasure, it's a real pleasure to take somebody through the steps and work with them, and even when, I'm talking to other people that aren't my sponsees, they could be being sponsored by somebody else. But they've just asked me for a little bit of advice or something like that. And, it's an absolute pleasure to just help, I've recently started saying in my share that you've got that really annoying saying when people go, oh, it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. Well, it takes a lot more energy to be an addict and to be in the madness and the malady than it does to be free of it and, and helping others, even though you have to sacrifice your time and give up time every day or whatever to do the book work. But it's there's a reward there that is priceless, and I know that it keeps me clean and sober. So, that is totally priceless. That is, why would I not do something that makes me feel good in myself, for helping another person and also keep me clean and sober? I'd be mad not to. So, it's the next stage on, to keep that continual sobriety and clean time ticking over. It's literally like a meter in a taxi where it's just ticking over and ticking over. And you stop counting your days so much, but you're very aware that you're still doing it 24 hours at a time. But yeah, it's a really, really beautiful experience. to work with others and continue that cycle going. You know, you've got a little bit more time on me, Paul, and you probably had quite a few more sponsees. But you know, do you feel the same? Do you sort of see that bigger picture?
Absolutely. And, you know, I think consistently, you know, trying to listen at meetings and shares just like what we just heard, you know, give us the impetus, the desire to keep on going. You know, and a couple of metaphors for the purpose of identification. And I know you and I discussed this a few weeks ago, Rob, when I got that phone call, it's here, right? By the time the voice spoke after I'd pushed the button, I'd have my coat on. There was no messing around, right? You know, be halfway down the stairs. Are you there? Yeah, right. Are you coming? Yep, I'll be there. 2 minutes, you know, 10 minutes, I'll be there. You know, there was no messing around, you know, nor did I ever get and was like, well, I think I'll just leave that for the weekend. That was not my experience, Rob. No. You know, and if a bloke wants to get into this process, right, what you're doing in half an hour, not tomorrow or next week or the week after, right? You know, I've got an hour free. If you give me an hour, you want to get into work, okay, let's do it. And you know, I think the motivation ultimately comes from that relationship with God. And you know, I mean, if we're talking about living from spirit and a spiritual program of action, then that means connection with source. And connection with source means life. And life means a desire to be helpful to others, you know. And as I say, we've got 3 podcasts on sponsorship, and you're on the first one, I think. What is sponsorship? And or is it the second one? No, it's how do I sponsor, I think you're on. But anyway, you can check those out, listeners, on this channel. As regards the motivation to keep on keeping on, I ultimately think that's what it boils down to. I really do. In practical terms, it has to be a pleasant experience. You know, my heart goes out to people in early recovery. They complete the steps. Sometimes they're sort of commanded to get sponsees. I think that's wrong. This is all just my opinion. I think that's wrong. I think some people are deeply mentally challenged and are unsuitable for sponsorship at the present time. I think others are ill-equipped to take other people through the steps. They don't have the knowledge, the experience, the commitment, or the understanding to be doing that. I think it's a huge responsibility. But by all means, listeners, check out those trio of podcasts on that topic. Now, you know, that's my understanding, Rob, you know, and we have to keep on keeping on. So on any given day, what do I have in place that will give me vital spiritual experiences, right? So, you know, I mean, like I say, out of a spoon half a dozen times a day meant I was regularly having spiritual experiences. You know, I had no problem being committed to that, right? Carrying around all the bits and pieces, you know, all the ritual and paraphernalia, you know. So recovery is commitment. It absolutely is. But the fruit is, you know, what you learn in recovery. What I learned in recovery a year ago was true then, and it's still true now. And that's the wonderful thing about it. When I was high as a kite, you know, we'd discuss all kinds of things. Oh, yeah, that's great. Just think, but it was just Fantasy Island, Rob. I don't know if you remember that.
I think I'm a little bit young for that, Paul, but I do know it. I do know it.
It was an American TV show. But anyway, you know, the best made plans of mice and men, recovery has to be real. And, you know, when I look back to the early 30s, Rob, the early and mid 30s, before the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, our basic text, which we're going to be putting up on the screen in a moment, the chapter Into Action will be putting up on the screen and flicking through over the next half an hour. You know, when I look back in the early 30s, before there was a book, they were persons of persistent, prevailing prayer on a daily basis. They had their personal faith and trust, and they worked with others. You know, the steps had not been fully formulated. The big book had not been written. And so they had their personal walk with a higher power, with God, and they worked with others, and they kept up the consistency of those two principal things, and stayed sober. You know, so yeah, that would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's difficult to keep that sobriety going. Just because, you know, like when I was in addiction, you know, like you say, you sort of have that ritual, you know. I used to wake up in the morning. I used to have to sit there and try and work out, you know, what dealer I could go to, who I had robbed, who I owed money to, where was I going to get the money, you know, all those things. And it's an absolute minefield, you know, of mind, you know, of your mind, you know, and you know, this, if you don't overcomplicate this program, and if you don't overcomplicate what you have to do every day, and it's a lot less than what you did in addiction. You know, you just got to put a little bit of effort in, you know, probably an hour or so of your day. You know, you pretty well, that would cover your GRATS list, your nightly inventory, you know, your prayer, your meditation. You know, it's not much out of one day to you know, to give up. When we were in addiction, we gave up our whole day to sourcing and funding and whatever, you know, our drug addiction. And you know, you said earlier, you know, a life worth living. You know, I existed. I wasn't living. I existed. It was painful, and it wasn't enjoyable. It wasn't nice. You know, it wasn't a great time. It was horrible. And you know, now I'm living a life that is enjoyable. I get up every day and enjoy what I'm doing. You know, and I enjoy getting on a meeting, you know, and hearing other people. You know, my sponsor told me way back at the start, you're not going to get on with everybody in the room. You know, you're not going to like everybody. You're going to get annoyed by one bloke's voice. You're going to get annoyed by this girl's story. You're going to, you know, and some people repeat themselves over and over again. But you can tolerate it because, you know, love and tolerance is just the right way to go. So, you know, he said, you might not like everybody, but you can love everybody, you know, and, you know, I need to hear the rough with the smooth. I need to hear when people are struggling, and I need to hear when people are doing really well. You know, it fills my heart with joy when somebody's doing really well in their program, and they're getting it, and they're loving life, and they're getting those little God's gifts and God's shots, as I call them. And I also need to hear the pain when people are struggling, because it reminds me, you know, and it's that sort of short, sharp shock. You know, I lost a very close friend of mine this weekend, on Thursday. You know, I used to use with him, and it's taken me 9 months to get into the rooms. And he came for his first meeting, and unfortunately, there was a lot more going on in his head than everybody realised, and he unfortunately took his own life. And that is a reminder to me, you know, just how bad things can get. You know, because I was there myself before I found the rooms. So, you know, it's all about sort of what you hear and what you see. You know, it builds up that bigger picture. You know, obviously you host a meeting, as I do as well, and you know, you get to hear and see a very broad spectrum of drug abuse. You know, and you can take something from that. I do. I don't know if that's the same for you, Paul, that you sort of, take those bite-sized pieces and it builds a bigger picture,
Yeah, the growth that happens through listening in a room can't be measured. The wisdom of the rooms is available to anyone. And I'll be putting up a screen of meetings in a little while, in 20 minutes or so on the screen. And remember, listeners, you can pause and rewind these podcasts, as much as you like. And, I was just thinking, I had the privilege of taking a chap through this process recently, Rob, who I took through the process a year ago, and he stayed clean. And he just felt his motivation had dampened a little bit, his desire to continue in the process. His willingness, if you like, had reduced a little bit. Now he was still, he wouldn't mind me sharing, he was still praying each day. He was still clean, and thankfully his behaviours have generally been kept in check, but it eased off. He wasn't working with others. He wasn't reading the recovery literature. He was barely reading his spiritual literature. So, he realised that, I don't know if you'd call it a recovery wall, but a recovery fence, and so he has to go through them again. So we went through all the 12 steps. Now, obviously, a year is still relatively early recovery. And so we went through the process. We looked at step 1 in terms of drug addiction and powerlessness and unmanageability. Of course, we did. But we also looked at step 1 in terms of the spiritual principles of honesty and transparency. And external unmanageability happens, Rob, because of internal unmanageability. That's the reality. I medicated my wounds because I didn't like having the wounds, and I weren't happy about others and circumstances and self. So I medicated on my wounds. That's what most of us do, changing how we feel. Now, the thing is I can be clean and sober physically, but have drunken behavior, right? I can have drunken thinking and drunken speech and drunken behavior, clean and sober.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this chap, lovely lad, he's got just, I think he's coming up a year. And so we went through all the steps. We looked at step 1 in terms of inner unmanageability that can lead to external consequences, external manageable consequences. And then when we come to step 2, which says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, we chiefly looked at that in terms of the virtue and value of recovery meetings, the virtue and value of recovery literature, the virtue and value of 2 phone calls a day with people walking this same path of freedom from bondage to addiction. We looked at the virtue and value of prayer, you see. So we looked at how we can be restored to wholeness, to fullness, to completion, if you like, to sanity, through all the tools of the program, through spiritual principles and the real-time value of such things to him at the present time. And it was a wonderful, step 2's one of my most wonderful steps. I just love taking step 2, and I'm completing step 1 with a chap in half an hour, noon, an hour from now. And then we've had 2.5 hours on step 1. We're starting step 2, God willing, at tea time today. And he's brand new in, so we'll be looking at step 2 from a classical position of being recovered from all of the madness and the consequences and the powerlessness and unmanageability of step 1. So there's swings and roundabouts, Rob, you see. That other chap I was talking about a minute ago needed the added motivation of step 2 to continue and to keep his foot on the gas.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. I think with sponsees, I'm working with a couple of guys at the moment, and one of them has got a lot of life stuff going on. excuse me, you know, a lot of external stuff going on. And you know, he's only, oh God, what, 60, 70 days, you know, and I'm absolutely proud as punch of him, because some of the stuff that is going on for this guy at the moment, you know, I could see it could drive me to drinking drugs. You know, I'm absolutely made up that he's holding it together, and you know, he's really embraced the program. You know, but you know, with things, when you get those out of program, you know, general living life turning up and kicking you in the what's it, you know, he's coping with it really well. You know, dropped a few things off, and I've had to have a bit of a sort of a stern word and just say, look, you know what's coming. If you stop doing a couple of bits or whatever, and you think, oh, I'll do that later, I'll do this, I'll do that later, you know, it's going to creep up on you, you know, before you know it. You know, they say, you know, your relapse is outside in the car park doing press ups. You know, it's training and getting ready, and you've got to constantly realize that if you start dropping things out on this program, before you know it, you're actually probably in the back of your mind, in your psyche, you're planning a relapse yourself, you know, without realizing it, you know. But it's you know, it's just keeping your foot on the gas. Just don't drop anything out, you know, for the sake of, it's, you know, if I was unlucky enough to have, you know, a chronic illness, you know, I wouldn't stop taking a treatment, you know, that is keeping me alive and well, you know, like you know, cancer and having chemotherapy. You know, you wouldn't go, can't be bothered to have that, you know, this week, when it could jeopardize your life. Well, this jeopardizes lives. It takes lives on a daily basis, you know, multiple lives, you know, thousands around the world every single day, because of people just dropping bits out of the program. So, you know, if you've got something that works, then work it, you know. You'd be mad not to. You really would be mad.
No, absolutely. I've put up on the screen, Rob, a passage from There Is a Solution in Our Basic Text, Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book, which can be bought for £11 from alcoholics-anonymous.org.uk. And it can also be read 24/7 completely free or listened to at aa.org. So I just want to let everyone know that. We're on page 27. It says here, I've got it on the screen, some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. Or you could read, Rob, you have the mind of a chronic drug addict. And this is what the doctor said. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, is there no exception? Yes, replied the doctor, there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholic addicts have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. Addicts have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic addict of your description. Now, that, Rob, as you will know, where the asterisk is there, takes you to page 567, which I'm just going to very briefly go to if I can figure out how to use this. Hold on just a minute. Now, this is a wonderful part of the book, if I can find it again. Wait a minute. Oh, we're getting there now, I think. 469.
Yeah.
This is why it's called the Big Book.
Yeah, you're nearly there.
550. So this is the spiritual experience. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to just show a few things. So spiritual experience, spiritual awakening. Now, I need these every day at various points in the day. Like I said earlier, Rob, recovery is about having vital spiritual experiences each and every day. And that keeps the joy of recovery, the peace of recovery, the faith and trust in recovery, the process, the meetings alive, you see. And it says there that they don't have to be sudden or spectacular upheavals in the end of the second paragraph. They can be sudden revolutionary changes. Many of our members develop an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. And then it goes on to say in this paragraph here, I'll tell you what, I'll just leave that on screen a moment there. So the fourth paragraph, most of our experiences, though, are what William James, the psychologist, calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. And people have a profound alteration in their reaction to life. You know, so they tap an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. And, you know, coming up to the last few paragraphs there, it says, most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic or addict capable of honestly facing their problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided they do not close their mind to all spiritual concepts. They can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that nobody, whatever they believe or don't believe, nobody need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program, because willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. But these are indispensable. And then we have this quote that talks about contempt prior to investigation, you know, and arrogance and pride are very deceptive. You know, belligerent denial and resistance are very common for addicts, you know, but an open mind works real good. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, it's just about sort of when we're in addiction, we're like a blinkered racehorse, you know. We've got that tunnel vision, you know. We're only aiming for one thing every single day, and that is a drink or a drug to get us what we think is out of our problem, you know, and to get a high, you know, go to a you know, another place. But as you go through the steps, it's like those blinkers get taken off, and you get to see the bigger picture. You know, you know, I say things like waking up and smelling the coffee, or, you know, just opening your eyes to the world, you know. And, you know, we used to walk with our heads down, looking at our shoes, you know, no purpose in life, no direction, when we were in addiction. And when you come out the other side of this and you break it, you know, anything is possible. I mean, I know that, you know, my recent sort of backstory with the success of starting my own business and things like that. You know, that's been something I've tried to do for 5 years, and not been successful. And it's only through CA and working these steps and stuff that I've got that sense of purpose, and I've gone for it. You know, I've put as much effort into my life and making my life better as I did with my drug addiction, you know, and scoring and all the rest of it that goes with it. You know, anything is possible in life. You've just got to want it hard enough and try hard enough. And I believe that is definitely the same with this program. If you don't work it to its full 100% potential, you are not going to get the rewards out of it. You know, don't expect a brand new Lamborghini to be on the driveway and you know, and all the rest of it, you know, those sorts of things, because it's not about that. It's more sort of feeling complete, you know, feeling at peace, serenity. You know, when I talk to people now that I haven't spoken to for a little while, they're like, God, you know, you've changed so much. You're like really thoughtful, you know, and caring. And, you know, we can see the change in you, where I was, you know, egotistical and selfish and self-centered and, you know, all those bad defects of character. And don't get me wrong, you know, I'm sure you're the same, Paul. You know, we do have defects of character slip in from time to time, you know, but it's about understanding them, addressing them, you know, and dealing with them, you know. By no means, you know, it says in the book, by no means is anybody working the perfect program. We're not saints, you know, and you know, my halo slips, you know, quite often. But I now, you know, I know when it's happening, and I deal with it and I address it, you know. And I think if you can do that by learning how to work this program, you know, to your benefit, you know, you're not doing it for someone else, you're doing it for you. You know, you can really reap the rewards. You know, I don't know if you feel the same, that, you know, in that way.
What would you say to any listeners, Rob, that have perhaps taken their foot off the gas, that perhaps haven't picked up drugs again, but they've started to work the steps backwards, and their behaviours are manifesting? And what would your message be to such persons, Rob?
It would probably be something I couldn't broadcast, but I would just literally, I mean, I've said to my one of my sponsees before, I said, you know, wherever you've got a big mirror in the house, probably the bathroom, I said, go and have a good talk to yourself in the mirror, look at yourself. But I don't mean just look at yourself, look deep into your soul, you know, and ask yourself, do I want to go back there? You know, I can either do some simple things that I'm instructed to do, you know, and I can either do them off my own willpower, or, you know, you can go back to that pain and misery of addiction again, because it will come. You know, there's no point in pussyfooting around the subject. if you stop working the program, it will only be a matter of time before, you know, a relapse is you know, on the table, you know. So just, you know, get back to what you're doing. If you've got to, refresh yourself, you know, go through the steps again. You know, there is absolutely no harm in doing it. You don't just get one shot at this. You know, if you want to do a refresher every year, that's what I'm going to do. When I hit my year, I'm going to ask my sponsor to take me through the steps again. I might even keep my sponsor, but go through it with someone else, to get maybe a different angle on things, you know, slightly different angle on things. But yeah, you know, the biggest thing I could recommend to anybody is just don't go there. Don't risk it. You know, you would not play Russian roulette with a gun to your head, not knowing whether there's a bullet in the chamber. So why would you do that with this? You know it works,
right.
you know. So
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with the suggestions. You know, particularly in early recovery, do a meeting a day. Try and share at least every other day, even if it's just for a minute or two. Ring a couple of people that are walking the path of recovery at least twice a day, every day. Right? Read at least a couple of pages of the big book, and perhaps the 12 and 12, and perhaps other recovery literature every day. Read your spiritual literature every day. Eat reasonable food in reasonable amounts at reasonable times. Get up and go to sleep at a reasonable time, for a reasonable amount of time. You know, practice good self-care. Get outside help if you need it, right?
yeah,
You know, do step work. These suggestions are completely free and completely painless. You know, and you and me have spoke before, Rob, about the importance of step 10, 11, and 12. You know, someone once said that the first 9 steps are learning the chess pieces, and steps 10, 11, and 12 are actually playing chess, living life.
yeah, playing the game, yeah.
So when we're wrong, we promptly admit it. You know, and we continue to take personal inventory, spot check inventory, nightly inventory, and mini inventory. You know, pen to paper. You know, not key to keyboard or tapping away on a text message. Pen to paper. Right, that's where the conscious contact is with God. And you know, there's great power in column inventory and recognizing if we're becoming resentful. I mean, a mini inventory, Rob, you know, and please check out the Step 10 podcast where we discuss this at length on this channel. So, you know, a spot check inventory is right. I'm on a podcast with Rob. God, what's your will? What do you want us to say? What shall we talk about? Grant us wisdom, grant us certainty. I can do that inaudibly while you're talking, Rob. Right? What's the outcome here? Is what am I steering this conversation wrong? What will God's will want? What's happening here? Spot check inventory, you know, and there's other ways of doing spot check inventory. You know, nightly inventory is a wonderful thing. Did I do the will of God today? Could I have helped people more today? Was I prayerful today? Did I upset anyone today? Was I in the solution today? What could I have done differently today? You know, did I make the most of today? Nightly inventory, great tool. You know, and then if things crop up regularly on my nightly inventory, was I resentful? Was I angry? If things crop up regularly, Rob, I can get myself a sheet of A4, draw up a sheet that resembles the step 4 and 8 sheets, but I'll put at the top mini inventory, and it'll say what. The first column will be what or who, what, and then the next column, what it is, how it made me feel, and then there'll be some lines across the top. If anyone wants to check out the step 4 and step 8 podcasts on this channel, and you know, if you're used to 12-step recovery, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Across the top, was I resentful, angry, fearful, selfish, dishonest? And then did it affect the other person in this way? Did it make them angry, etc., etc.? And then at the end, the box, what is the solution? What is the will of God? What ought I to have done? Not what should I have done, because the past is the past, Rob. Can't be changed. But what ought I to have done? The last box. And on that mini inventory, Rob, I can put a resentment, a fear, a harm, or an amends, or anything on one sheet. And that is a mini inventory. Now, in step 11, I'm continuing in prayer and meditation on a daily basis to improve conscious contact with God. I'm praying for the will of a sovereign unseen being to give me power for life and recovery. Right? And then in step 12, I'm a compass mentis, Rob, that something's happened, and it didn't just happen one day, Rob. Oh, I feel a bit different today, Rob. I think it's the alignment of the stars, Or I think it's that new coffee, or it's that meal. No, look. We have had, you have had, 24 million human beings have had a spiritual awakening as a direct result of these steps. That's the first part of step 12. So check out the step 12 podcast. It's a friend of me and Rob's called Graham Newman that died clean a few weeks ago. He wouldn't mind me saying. And we recorded the step 12 podcast on this channel. Check it out. And we discussed the 4 parts of step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening, listeners, are you clear that you've had a spiritual awakening? Yes. Are you clear why? Well, I'll tell you why. It's a result of these steps, Rob. Right? I'm clear that what's happened has happened because of these steps. Right? And then the next thing is we tried to carry this message to addicts. And that's the thing. We try to carry this message. What message? The message of the spiritual experience that happens as a direct result of these steps. That's the message we try and carry. And then the 4th part of step 12, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. And that is recovery right there. And it's a wonderful step, so to be discussing spiritual. I mean, look, I once heard this: unspiritual wretches discuss other people. It's called gossip. Don't go and sip alcohol, and don't go and sip from the devil's cup, Rob. It's not going to do you any good, mate. You'll just end up poisoned. Avoid toxicity, right? Keep a pure heart. Now, the thing is to be talking. Not so great people discuss people that perhaps are a little bit greater discuss events, but the greatness is in discussing spiritual principles and the practical effect in life that spirituality gives us. That's where the blessing is, I think. And to be having conversations about these principles, that is where the solution is, to be in the solution. So that's my thoughts. Now we've come to the last 5 or 7 minutes or so of the podcast, Rob. So I'm going to be putting a few things up on screen. So we'll perhaps get another minute or two a couple of times a piece. So I'm just going to hand it back to you while I do that.
Yeah, I mean, just regarding what you just said, it's the spiritual experience. I sort of say like an internal snap. Allowed me to understand my addiction, understand the book, understand where my sponsor was coming from, what he was trying to teach me and guide me towards. And when I had that, it just sort of, I don't know the best way to explain it. It's like everything was in a different language, and I didn't quite get it. I sort of did, but not fully. And when that happened, like my connection with my higher power was like, the super fast broadband had just been switched on. I felt that when I was, asking for help from God or praying for someone else to get it, to understand it, You know, I sort of felt that I was being listened to, I was being understood, and things were starting to happen that I couldn't explain. You know, and it just it completed the program for me. It was sort of like the final. I won't say the final nail in the coffin because that doesn't sound great, but it was that. You know, it was the cherry on top. You know, it just all came together when that happened for me. And you know, like I said earlier, you know, if something is working for you, why question it? Why not just do it? You know, if something's working, you know, you just don't overcomplicate it by overthinking it. You know, if you're happy, if you're enjoying your life now, if you're a much better partner, a better version of yourself, then why doubt it, question it, and overthink it? Just embrace it and do it. You know, that's what I think, Paul. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
that's the way that I go about things. You know,
and if you're listening to this and you're going through troubles, don't give up. Never ever give up. Just keep on keeping on. The next right thing, the next right thing. Rob, when we put our best foot forward, right, our best foot gets stronger and better. We get a little bit wiser, and even our worst foot gets a little bit better, reluctantly. Now, you know. Now the thing is, you know, in my experience, Rob, persons that struggle, it's life struggles. People get clean after working these 12 steps. There's no question about it. And many of them stay clean if they thoroughly follow this path. But the thing is, it's been my experience that other things crop up, like they start getting miffed about the finances or the consequences, right? So they're back looking, you know, at step one, they're angry about the consequence, or they feel less than, you know, or they've got giant egos and miniature self-esteem. It's life issues that many people have that struggle. Depression, loneliness, isolation, future, regret of the past, anxiety of the present. Well, these are life issues. Millions of people in Britain ain't happy today, mate. That's the reality of life, you know. And so, you know, staying clean and having a daily program of action means I can be reasonably content and reasonably useful to others, you know, and that's how I see the process. Now, we're pretty much there, but before I wrap things up, I just want to give you another minute or two to share with us, Rob. I always love what you have to say, but before I do that, I just want to let everyone know that on the screen is a list of some of the Cocaine Anonymous meetings. There are hundreds of others, but this is just some of them on the screen, you know. And in my experience, you hear the wisdom and the courage and the serenity of folks in recovery in all these meetings. But I just want to let everyone see that if these are UK times, but they're all global meetings. Anyone's welcome at them. So, I mean, at the top left there, Rob, every morning, the Breakfast Club, 7:30 in the morning. Great gratitude underneath that every morning, 9:30. Pop-up recovery every morning, 10:30. We Can Recover, where you and me are often found, Rob, 2 p.m. every day, 8 p.m. every day. Daily Reprieve over on the top right every night at 9:30, Reaching Out every night at 11, Tarzana every night at midnight. That's UK time. So, you know, that is 8 meetings that are on every single day. Now, if you're listening to this and you've never been to a Zoom meeting, please do not be put off. You know, only about a fifth of participants put their cameras on. So never feel if you come on a Zoom meeting, you've got to put your camera on. The vast majority of folks do not. Nor feel that you'll have to speak. You know, I would say over half of the attendees simply listen. And so please come along to a meeting. If you're struggling with drugs, you can lose the desire to use and find a new way to live. So over to you, Rob.
Yeah, well, just in closing, you know, it's meetings, you know, Zoom meetings, face-to-face meetings are amazing. You know, they give you, you know, other people's experiences, you know, a bit of wisdom from the elders, you know, people with long sobriety, And you can also learn a lot of things from people that are in the beginning. But you know, heed the warning: meeting makers don't make it. You know, if you are just doing meetings and you're not working the rest of your program, you're going to struggle. If you're not doing any meetings and you're working the rest of your program perfectly, you're still going to struggle. You know, these things are set out, you know, in that first page of the big book, when your sponsor asks you, I mean, this is the way I do it. You know, we put down the triangle of unity, you know, and fellowship, and explain the illness and the solution. Those points are there for a reason. Those daily things are there to be done for a reason. And as soon as you drop one out, you're starting to weaken that armor that you've got, you know, that you're getting from your higher power. So, you know, for anybody, whether you're 10 years in or 10 days in, do what's asked of you, and you can be free. You really truly can be free of the pain of addiction and the nightmare that you were living. I know I am, and I was a pretty hopeless cause. And I've just turned 9 months, and that's just a little miracle in itself. And great things have come. You know, those 9-step promises, go and read them. You know, things do start to happen in your life. Every single person I've spoken to throughout the world doing this program, if they're doing the program right and they're doing everything they're told to do, then they're all finding that life is changing for the better, you know. And you can live your life rather than just existing. I think that's it from me, mate.
Well, thanks, Rob. Thanks. And you know, my message to anyone that's struggling is, you know, I once said it put like this, you know, don't spend too much time looking in the rear view mirror. You're not going in that direction, you know.
Yeah.
Onwards and upwards, keep moving forward. And, you know, family, thanks so much for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure, and always your words of wisdom, Rob. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Always my pleasure, Paul. Always a pleasure.
Okay, until next time. Good stuff, Rob.
Yeah.
Thanks, family, for listening. And don't take your foot off the gas. Bye for now.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Paul. Thank you, guys.